Hey, welcome back to Snapbolt Games. My name is Max, and I'm going to be doing something a little bit different today. There's a couple things different. One, you can see that my camera setup is totally different now. I just upgraded, got some new equipment, got the green screen. You can see there's a little discoloration here when there's dark colors on the screen, but I just got it in. I'll work on it. I'll fiddle with some settings, and we'll get that a little bit better. But I think this looks a lot cleaner, looks a lot better. I'm excited to upgrade, so I'm stoked on that. But two, we're going to be doing something different because I'm not actually going to be playing Magic right now. I'm going to talk about the new Strixhaven cards for Pauper, all the commons. I'm going to go over all of them, but I'm also going to do my top five cards that I think will affect Pauper. And I'm actually going to do the top five first, and then I'll go through the list kind of quickly and just talk about all the cards and if I have some thoughts on them or if they're trash. So we'll go like that. But let me shout out my channel. It's youtube.com/snapbolt. There's a link in the description below. You can go to my channel, check it out. The first link, you can actually subscribe. I'd appreciate it if you do. And just throw a like on this video if you like this content. A lot of people asked for me to do a review of the new Strixhaven cards, and it just came out. Just got the new equipment, so I'm stoked to get into this. So again, how this is going to go is first I'm going to go over my top five commons that I think will have the most impact in Pauper from Strixhaven, and then I'm going to go kind of just over all the spoilers. I have them here over all the commons, and we'll go through them, and I'll talk about each one, whether it's trash or whether it can be reasonable. Okay, so let's just get right into it. Let's begin, instead of with number five, let's just begin with some honorable mentions here. So, coming in at one of the honorable mentions, we have Eureka Moment. This card is interesting because this is just like a super growth spiral basically for 4 mana. And you might say, well, that doesn't seem that great. Costing 4 mana instead of two, growth spiral almost doesn't already see any play. So why would you want this? Yeah, that is a good point. But this is like because it's draw two. This is more of like a end of turn inspiration type effect. 4 mana instant draw two. Yeah, that's not good enough for Pauper, but putting a land is pretty important, especially for some decks like Tron. So imagine if Tron played one copy of this. You could just go end of turn teachings, get Eureka Moment. You get to get a little extra value of putting an extra land in. I don't think it's quite good enough to really see play, but it seems like a fun card and just a card that I really like. So it's something that I'm interested in trying out, but I'm not sure if it's quite good enough just because at rate it's not strong enough. And Growth Spiral is probably just better. Like if you want to pay blue green, it's probably better just playing Growth Spiral. And sometimes like a deck like blue green mill with a bunch of fogs plays a Growth Spiral or two, but even then a lot of times they do not. This is a little bit different again because it's more card advantage than Growth Spiral, with a slight upside of putting a land onto the battlefield, but I still don't think it's quite good enough. Okay, another honorable mention. I have three honorable mentions. Is Teach by Example. This is interesting. I've heard a lot of buzz about this. There's some interesting stuff you can do with it. The moment I saw it, I was like, ooh, can we copy like some card advantage spells? Of course, that's what I was thinking. So it says blue, red. So 2 mana instant. Whenever you cast your next instant or sorcery spell this turn, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for this copy. So again, you can just copy something like a Behold the Multiverse or a Thoughtcast or, Of One Mind and just draw a bunch of cards. You can also just copy like Lightning Bolt and things like that. And what's interesting about this card is if you just go like on your turn, let's say you have 4 or 5 mana, you go cast Teach by Example. The opponent is almost forced to respond. Kind of like what's the 2 mana 2/1 that copies the next spell you play? It's like kind of different than Snapcaster Mage in a way because if you just lead Teach by Example, they're like, oh my god, I need to counter this because then the next spell is just going to be doubled and I'm going to have to counter one of those anyway. So if you just go Teach by Example, they're kind of forced to counter, and then maybe you can get up to some tricks later. There's also some cool stuff. Oliver Jukes mentioned a cool one, which is Fire Blast with this, because you just go tap red, and then you go float 2 mana, cast Teach by Example, and then sack the 2 mountains, cast Fire Blast, copy it. So that's 8 damage. So you basically double your Fire Blast. But the problem is, I don't see this being good in Burn because imagine you're like playing Burn, you're like, okay, I need to draw a Lightning Bolt. My whole deck is Lightning Bolts. Oh, I drew teach by example. That's just not quite what you want for like a card you can top deck. And just like going teach by example, copy lightning bolt, bolt you twice. I mean, you could just have two lightning bolts instead of teach by example in your deck. So I don't think that's quite going to make the cut either, but there is some shenanigans and maybe there's some type of like combo-y stuff you can get up to with this that I don't quite understand yet. So teach by example, second honorable mention. Third one, Quandrix Pledge Mage. It's 3 mana total, two hybrid, blue green, and one. And it's creature, merfolk, druid, 2/2. So 3 mana, 2/2, not very good on rate, but it's Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery, put a +1/+1 counter on this. And I wouldn't underestimate these type of effects. I mean, Mana Gorge or Hydra is what, 3 mana, 1/1 trample. Whenever a player casts any spell, put a +1/+1 counter on it. But that's a vintage card. And imagine this in either like a blue deck where you just want a big body. What if your deck was just like Ponder, Preordains, Counter Spells, a bunch of blue cards, and then you play this, you untap with it, and you're like Ponder, Preordain, play another spell, leave up Counter Spell. Now you have like a 4/4 already, and threaten to turn into a 5/5 and growing as the game goes on. But this doesn't have evasion, doesn't have trample. It's just something to keep in mind that Magecraft is really powerful. So this is interesting, but being a 3 mana 2/2, I just don't think it's going to get there. It's stuck in the honorable mentions. Even the top five, I think, is a little bit of a stretch, honestly. But yeah, 3 mana 2/2, it can get huge. It can be a problem. You can even do tricky stuff like if it's some type of like Kiln Fiend deck or something, could run something like this because it just again gets really big. And if you give it like Team or Battle Rage or something, it kind of has synergy with that. But I don't think this is quite strong enough. Out of the honorable mentions, I like Eureka Moment just because I love this type of effect. But yeah, I'm not really sure about that. Okay, let's get rid of these. And now we can go on to the top five commons for Strixhaven. Number five, we have Charge Through. This is interesting. 1 mana instant, green, target creature gains trample until end of turn, draw a card. I don't know how much this can actually do, but if you're some type of like Kiln Fiend deck where you're not blue for some reason, or you're just a green deck with a bunch of fatties, we'll get to some fatties later. 1 mana instant draw for green is pretty interesting. It's kind of like Crash Through, the one red sorcery. Creatures you control gain trample, draw a card, it's a sorcery. But this is a one green instant draw card. Again, I'm not sure exactly where this comes in or what it slots into. Like, I don't think Stompy really wants this. But I mean, one green instant draw card is nothing to scoff at. So just good card to keep in mind. And it could see some play, especially in a deck maybe that's not blue that wants, card filtering, card draw, and if the effect of trample is a benefit, if you're trying to like again make a big Killing Fiend or something, giving it trample and drawing a card is pretty reasonable, especially in green. So I don't know where it slots in, but I could see it doing something. Okay, number four. This is actually interesting. This is going to be a little bit of a slog to get through because number four, I didn't want to just say one card. It didn't really make sense to me for this category. Basically, what I have is um, all the learn cards for Pauper. And I know that's kind of a cop out, but let me tell you why. I can tell you which ones of the learn cards I like the best, but it doesn't really make sense. So I kind of like at number four on my list, I just had learn/lessons because it doesn't make sense to like say that one lesson is the best. You can say which learn enabler is the strongest, and I'll get to that, but it doesn't make sense because the whole thing is that you have a lesson package in the sideboard, and it doesn't make sense to say like, well, this is the best lesson. I mean, you could say that, but the whole point of it is that it's a variable package with different mana costs that are good in different situations and at different points of the game. And I think these might actually be good. Maybe they should be higher on my list, honestly. But some of the enablers are a little sketchy, but let me get into what they are, and then we'll get into why I think they could see some play. So let's just take Arcane Subtraction, for example. It's one blue, one colorless instant. Target creature gets -4/-0 till end of turn, and you learn. And learning is the big part. So you say you may reveal a lesson card you own from outside the game, meaning your sideboard, and put it into your hand. Or you can discard a card to draw a card. So basically what you do, you have these lesson cards. I'll just show them here. these are all the Pauper lessons that you can have in your sideboard. So you have these in your sideboard. So like probably the most basic one, Introduction to Prophecy, 3 colorless sorcery lesson. Okay. Scry 2, draw a card. So it's just preordain for 3 colorless mana. And you might think, well, that's so much worse than preordain. Why would I ever want it? But it's actually just not preordain at all. It's again, you you have access to all these different lessons. So depending on what you want, if you're like, under no pressure, yeah, you can scry and draw and find what you need. But there's other lessons that do different things depending on what you want. And these learn spells just seem really powerful because it's at worst case, you don't want to find a lesson. You can discard a card, draw a card, which is decent. I mean, this card is one of the worst ones. The effect doesn't really do anything, so you're just learning. But yeah, these lessons just seem really strong to me because you just can have a lesson package in the sideboard, which is good at different points in the game. Um, Let me just go over which of the learn spells that I like, and then we'll go into the lessons and how you might want to build your sideboard. So one I actually really like is Cram Session. One black green, so one hybrid black green and one, so 2 mana sorcery, gain 4. Gain 4 is actually pretty good. Because think about it this way. Just think of it if it was 2 mana sorcery, gain 4, draw a card. That would be pretty good. But it's actually, I think, a lot better than that. Because it's 2 mana, gain 4, draw a card, but I get to choose what card I draw. And I can choose to draw environmental sciences, expanded anatomy, fractal summoning, which is actually a strong one, pest summoning really strong, inkling summoning also really strong, introduction to prophecy. So I could have, I don't know about introduction to annihilation yet. Exile target non-land permanent's controller draws a card. Letting them draw is not great, but even having this just as an out, just in case, is decent. And then this one just makes it 3/2 spirit. But think of it like a companion, basically. Companions were obviously busted when you had access to them when they were on the sideboard and you could just play them for free. But now we have to pay the cost of learning first, of whatever the learn spell cost is. But that's not that big of a cost to always have access to a variety of spells. So I'm really excited about these. I mean, again, imagine this 2 mana, gain 4. That buys you time in something like, the rock, black, green, and then tutor a card to your hand. So I can tutor Introduction to Prophecy if I'm not under pressure. If they have a couple 1/1s on the ground, I'll just tutor Pest Summoning. Make 2 1/1s that can trade. That's so much value. So for one card, I went 2 mana, gain 4, draw Pest Summoning, play it. That's like pretty insane. I could also just make a 2/1 flying. That's so strong. Like, yeah, 3 mana for a 2/1 flying is bad rate. You would never play that in your deck. That just doesn't make any sense. But when you have the option of playing a 3 mana 2/1 flying in your sideboard, plus 3 mana scry 2 draw a card, plus expanded anatomy, plus environmental sciences to fix your mana, plus a possible pest summoning, plus fractal summoning, you could play all these in the sideboard in the same deck. Even elemental summon, you can like have different things along the curve. Obviously, fractal summoning, create a 0/0 fractal and put X+1/+1 counters on it. That's insane in the late game. When your early game is tutoring like an expanded anatomy or an environmental science or maybe an inkling summoning or a pest summoning, when you're doing these in the early game and then you have the option of a late game power, it's like Karn the Great Creator. You can tutor cheap cards, you can tutor expensive cards, and that's what makes it powerful. That you have so many options. So I really like Cram Session, especially in something like a black green rock shell. In worst case, imagine you draw this late and you're like, none of my lessons are really that great somehow, even though Introduction to Prophecy is always going to be fine, especially when the game kind of stalls out. But you're like, I don't really want Introduction to Prophecy. I don't think I have time for that. Then I'll just discard a card, draw a card. I have an extra land in my hand, maybe from a bounce land. I'll just go 2 mana, gain 4, discard a land, draw a card. So these seem really strong. I like Cram Session. I'm not going to read all these because I don't want this to run too long, but Pop Quiz is interesting. Yeah, it seems underpowered, but again, think of it this way. 3 mana instant, draw a card, and then tutor another card. So 3 mana, draw a card, and then tutor a slightly underpowered card, but one that you might want in that situation. That seems great. And at worst case, you don't want to tutor, you don't think you have time, or you don't want any of those spells, they're not going to get you out of the game. 3 mana, draw a card, and then discard a card, draw a card. That's not the worst at rate, 3 mana, draw 2, discard 1, and that's like worst case scenario when you're not getting elemental summoning, or you're not getting introduction to prophecy, or you're not getting inkling summoning. So yeah, just the option to get a 3 mana 3/2, it feels almost like a companion to me. It's like, yeah, Kahira's not good, but when you just get it for free on the side, it makes it pretty strong. Um, I do actually really like Hunt for Specimens. This might be the best one. This is 2 mana sorcery, create a 1/1 black and green pest creature token with when this creature dies, you gain 1 life, learn. So think of it like a Elvish Visionary, basically. It's 2 mana, 1/1, and when it dies, you draw a card. That's bad, but you get to tutor a card. So it's like 2 mana, 1/1 with the death ability that also tutors a card. So yeah, that card is worse on rate, but imagine you just tutor Expanded Anatomy, put 2+1/+1 counters on target creature, gains Vigilance till end of turn. Now for the rest of the game, like you have this threat of making a big creature. Again, you can just tutor Introduction to Prophecy, tutor Pest Summoning. So you can do whatever you want. And learning is really good at, like, again, discarding lands in the late game where it's like similar to drawing a card anyway. So yeah, Hunt for Specimens seems like a good one. Guiding Voice is interesting just because it's a 1 mana learn, which is definitely relevant. 1 mana learn seems strong to me. And putting a +1/+1 counter isn't that bad. 1 mana, give a creature a +1/+1 counter, and then tutor a card. That could be pretty good in certain decks. Like, I don't know if Mono White Heroic would want that, but this seems like a reasonable card to me. Worst case, 1 mana sorcery, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, discard a card, draw a card. Not bad. All right. First Day of Class is another interesting one, and this one has some combo potential. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on it, gains haste, learn. So you can do some interesting stuff. If anything has persist, and then you have a sacrifice outlet for 0 mana, you can play First Day of Class, then you sack a creature with persist. It'll come back with a -1/-1 counter, but then it entered the battlefield, and you put a +1/+1 counter on it, and then you can just do that and get infinite enter the battlefield triggers for, like, if you have a Soul Warden or something, you can gain infinite, or you might be able to drain them. And you could also just like get up to 6 mana, play this, play Battle Screech, and just like kind of just make a bunch of flyers. But this seems pretty clunky. Yeah, it has some combo potential, but I don't think those combo decks necessarily will be that great, especially because they're creature-based combo decks, and there's a lot of removal in Pauper. So long story short, number 4, learning and lessons, and I think they're going to be really strong. Just the toolbox aspect seems really good to me. Um, I'm not sure if the rate is just too bad for them to really be worth it. I'm gonna have to mess around and try them. But again, I think they're good. Environmental Sciences just seems great to have access to. Only 2 mana. Search a library for a basic land, put it into your hand. So you fix your mana if you're like stuck on mana and you gain 2 life. Nice little buffer, good against burn in game 1. Just seems like a nice thing to have access to. I think they're going to be strong. Okay, that's enough about talking about those. Let's move on and let's go on to number 3. So number 3 is also kind of a cop out, but not really. Number 3 is the campus lands. I think these are pretty strong um, because I think they're better in a lot of situations and in certain decks than the gain life lands. If you don't care about snow and you want access to the 4 mana tap scry one, which is stronger than you think, trust me. 4 mana tap scry one is almost the blue castle. So, I mean, it's pretty strong, and these fix your mana, so they're really not bad. Where I see these slotting in is in Flickertron, because Flickertron already plays the like the blue red or the blue green tap land where you gain 1 life when it enters the battlefield, and there is some synergy with like Ghostly Flicker flickering that up and down, like back and forth, to gain life in certain situations. But I think these are honestly just better because sometimes you Tron up, but then you don't have anything to do immediately. You haven't found your Bonder's Ornament, so you can just go like easily tap 4 mana, I have Tron, scry one, and then find what I need a little bit better. So I think these are better than the gain life lands in Tron. Another place I see them being better is in Boros Bully, because that plays the gain life land as well, and you might want some split because you still might want some gain life lands, maybe only like 1 or 2 lore hold campus, but it seems good to have like 1 campus or 2 campus and 2 gain life lands, kind of some split, because the scry one, yeah, you might not activate that often, but in a league, if you activate 2 or 3 times, that's pretty strong for a land. So I'm pretty excited about these campuses. I think they're a solid power level, and I think they could see some play in Pauper. But again, the new snow duels are better for the most part with the basic land types and just being a snow land. So I really like the snow lands, but I also like these. These have been sweet, so it's some good design. Okay, now we're getting into the good stuff. That was number three, the campus lands. So number two, my what I think is the second best common in Strixhaven for Pauper. Da, 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 Thrilling Discovery. Okay, this card seems sweet to me. One red, one white, sorcery. You gain 2 life. Then you may discard 2 cards. If you do, draw 3 cards. So this is like a cathartic reunion that costs red, white. There's 2 life tacked onto it, but the biggest part about this is that the discard 2 is not part of the cost, and there's not really any dredge decks in Pauper. So if you play Cathartic Reunion, which is 2 mana, it's 1 red, 1 colorless sorcery, as an additional cost, discard 2 cards and then draw 3. If you play that and they go counterspell, then you've already discarded the 2 cards, you don't get to draw 3. But with Thrilling Discovery, it's 2 mana, you gain 2 life, you put it on the stack, or you cast it, you put it on the stack, then they have to decide if they counter or not before you discard the cards. So I think this could see some play in like Boros Bully, or you can make a slightly new deck with Faithless Looting and Thrilling Discovery, and then you can get a lot of value out of like cards like Battle Screech, with Prismatic Strands. You can even play the 1 mana 1/1 cat, where you can essentially cast it from the graveyard to make a cat token. So there's a lot of like just like good value in red and white. And if you play this plus Faithless Looting, you're really going to be churning through your deck. And in a way, this is like better than Faithless Looting. I know it's probably not. It costs 2 mana. That's like double the cost of Faithless Looting, but gain 2 life is pretty reasonable, especially while you're ripping through your deck. I mean, this is a cantrip basically. It's discard 2, draw 3. So it's card neutral basically. You're spending this card, you're discarding 2, but then you're making up for it with 3 more cards. So it's like, Preordain. 1 mana, you use the Preordain, but you draw 1. But this is like still card neutral. So Faithless Looting is draw 2, discard 2. So you're actually down a card. But this, you're not. And with all the discard synergy in Pauper, I think this is going to be pretty strong, especially in a deck like Boros Bully, where when you're discarding a Prismatic Strands, you're actually like gaining a huge advantage because now you can play that card for 0. Now you can play Battle Screech without paying the expensive 4 mana cost of it and just get some flyers. There might even be more synergy that I'm not thinking of, but it seems great in that deck, and I'm going to try to brew with it. Okay. And now, what I think is the sweetest card, the number 1 card for Pauper in Strixhaven, is Bayou Graf. This is a big doggo. This is a good boy. This this is like a swamp dog basically. It's a plant dog. So 1 green, 1 colorless, 2 mana creature plant dog. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature or pay 3. So this is an additional cost. You have to sacrifice a creature or pay 3. But it's a 2 mana 5/4. So this is just keyword large, keyword big. This dog is definitely an absolute unit. And I see this slotting directly into Stompy. This is the first thing I want to try when the set comes out. I'm kind of like spilling the beans here because, everyone I think can kind of figure out that this is going to be good in Stompy. There's a lot of ways to enable this, and I'll just go over them real quick. There's Young Wolf, turn 1 Young Wolf, turn 2 sacrifice Young Wolf, cast this, and Young Wolf comes back as a 2/2, and then you have a 2/2 and a 5/4 on turn 2. That's so much power. And imagine just slapping a Rancor on this, attack for 7 trample. That's like insane. You can also just go like Burning Tree into this, sack the Burning Tree. That's not as good, but that's an option. You can also just sack one of your 1 mana things like a Quirion Ranger and just put a 5/4 into play. The other one I really like is Nest Invader. So you go just turn 2 Nest Invader, turn 3 play this, and you sack the Eldrazi spawn token. But what this also does, which I really, really like, which I think is going to be good, is enabling Morbid in that deck specifically, because you play Hunger of the Howlpack, and Hunger of the Howlpack is 1 mana instant, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. But if it's Morbid, if a creature died this turn, you put 3 +1/+1 counters on it instead. So imagine like turn 2 Nest Invader, make the Eldrazi spawn, turn 3 land, play Graf, play the big boy. You sack the Eldrazi spawn, and then they're like, okay, you attack with your Nest Invader, and then you just get to put 3 +1/+1 counters on it because you enabled Morbid with your 2 mana 5/4. So there's a lot of sweet lines like that, and this card is just, again, it's just massive. I'm excited to play with it. I think it's going to be strong. So that is the top 5 commons for Strixhaven. Again, this is my first time recording some non-gameplay Magic, but it's actually been pretty fun. It's fun talking about these cards. So now what I think I want to do is I'm just going to pull up the entire spoiler. It's right here. Um, and then I'm just going to go through all the cards quickly and just talk about why I think they will or will not see play and if any of them are interesting. I'm not going to go over the cards I already talked about. And there is yeah, I'm not going to go over the cards I already talked about, and I'm not really going to I'm not going to read every single card. They're right here on the screen, and you can always pull up this spoiler, this card image gallery on Scryfall or wherever else and look at the cards. But I will say, even the top 5, like charge through is like kind of iffy on if it's going to see play. So there's not going to be that many where I'm like, oh, this is for sure going to see play. But if there's anything I've left out on the top 5 that you think should be on there, please let me know. Comment down below. I respond to all the comments. So let me know, and I'll just go through these real quick, and then we'll wrap this thing up. Okay, Ageless Guardian, just not good enough on stats. Just I don't think it's going to do anything. Not going to make it. Archway Commons, we already have this card. It doesn't see any play. It's not going to see play. Arrogant Poet, not strong enough. Maybe if you want to pay life for something, but then you can't pay 2 life indefinitely. You can only do it when it attacks. Not strong enough. Again, I'm not even going to read all these. Beaming Defiance is a card I heard some people talking about, but it's just too expensive on rate for what you get. Target creature gets +2/+2 and gains hexproof. You don't really need to pump power and toughness and give hexproof most of the time. It's like, yeah, I guess it's kind of like Vines of Aspid, but you can't play it for 1. It just seems worse than something like Emerge Unscathed and Mono White Heroic. Either you want the hexproof or the pump power and toughness, and you don't want both effects on an expensive card generally. You want your protection spell to cost 1 mana, so it's just not going to see play. Big play I don't think is good. Obviously assistance not good. This is actually an interesting one. I thought about even giving this an honorable mention, but I don't think there's really any other fractals. This is 3 mana, blue-green, 2/2 human wizard, and when it enters the battlefield, you create a 0/0 blue fractal and then put a +1/+1 counter on each fractal you control. But this is interesting. So it's 3 mana and you get 3 power and toughness. 3 power, 3 toughness, because it's a 2/2 and a 1/1. But then if you ever get to flicker this or like, like ephemerate this or something, it's actually pretty interesting because you go Biomathematician, is that it? Biomathematician, did I just butcher the name the first time? You play it, you get your 1/1 and your 2/2. Then you flicker it, then you get another 1/1, but this says put a +1/+1 counter on each fractal you control. I don't think there's that many ways to make fractals in Pauper, which is why I don't think it's going to be quite strong enough. But that is interesting because then at that point you're getting 2 2/2s and a 1/1 out of this card. And if you keep if you have some way to keep flickering it or bringing it back, you could get some serious value out of it. But yeah, I don't think it's good. This card caught my interest for a second. 2 mana, 2/2, and then tap. Attacking spirits get +1/+0 till end of turn. But I did a quick spirit search, and there's nothing that great. There's actually Guardian of the Guild pack as a spirit, and there's a couple other ones. There's the white 5 mana 3/3 flying that brings something back that's a spirit. But I don't think there's enough cheap spirits where you want to go wide and then give them all +1/+0. Most of the spirits don't care too much about getting 1 more power, and you're not really, again, spirit tribal yet. There's nothing to really do with that, so I don't think this is going to make it either. Blood Researcher was actually an interesting one. 3 mana 2/2 menace. Whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So it's like a big Ajani's Pride Mage with menace, which is actually pretty interesting. Which seems pretty good in like a Soul Sisters type deck, and I have a black-white Soul Sisters brew. So if you stretch to 3 colors, you could play this as another life gain payoff. Because with 1 Soul Sister in play, you play this, and now it triggers on itself, basically coming into play because you get a gain 1 trigger. And imagine with 2 Soul Sisters, then you play a 3 mana 4/4 menace, and then every creature you play gets +2/+2, assuming that you're able to have a huge board like that. But even then, it's like you play this, and then even with 1 Soul Sister out, you play this, trigger on the stack for gain 1, they just bolt this in response. And then it's like, oh, I just paid 3 mana, and I just got paid 3 mana, they spent 1 mana, and they dealt with my thing. I didn't get any value. So I don't think it's going to make it. I don't think this frog is good. Just a 2 mana 2/1 flying. The ability is not that relevant. Burying books I thought was interesting because putting a creature second from the top of the library sometimes is better than killing it, but it's just too expensive. It's just not going to see play. Campus Guide, just a limited card. Cogwork Activist, just too expensive. Not even any Cascade Tron decks. You just don't want that. Curate is another interesting one that could see some play. Let me move it up out of my head. Um, Look at the top two cards of your library, put any of them into your graveyard, and the rest back on top of your library in any order, draw a card. So you get to essentially scry two, but then you can put any of those into your graveyard. So if you're like a reanimator deck, you can like look at the top two. If there's like a crusher in the top two, you can choose to put it into the graveyard. Or if there's like an exhume that you want to draw, you can put that on top and put the other card into the graveyard. So it's essentially 2 mana, scry two, but better draw card. But even that, I just don't think is good because in Pauper you're competing with Preordain, Ponder, Brainstorm, and just these other really, the best cantrips in the game. And while this could be good in something like Reanimator, I mean, there's even Thought Scour, where yeah, you don't get to choose, but costing one instead of two, again, two is double the cost of one, which is massive. So yeah, Curate, while it's interesting, I don't really think it'll see play. Crushing Disappointment, each player loses 2 life, you draw two. Instant for 4 mana in black. So this is another inspiration kind of card. I like this less than the other super growth spiral that I was talking about. But this is interesting in something like mono black control. If you have a lot of life gain, you could want one or two of these, but it's probably worse than Read the Bones, honestly. Making them lose two is interesting. I don't think mono black burn can play a 4 mana spell, so not really sure. Just don't think it's quite there on rate. I think it's worse than the super growth spiral. Um, yeah, Combat Professor, just not going to do it. 4 mana is too much. Defend the Campus, uh, is just not good enough on rate. Just a limited card. Dragon's Approach, I quickly did a dragon search and there's like 5 dragons that are legal in Pauper because usually they're uncommon or rare. And none of the dragons are that big. So yeah, you can shove a million Dragon's Approach into your burn deck if you want. But I don't think you want it. And Elemental Masterpiece, this is an interesting one. 7 mana sorcery, create two 4/4 blue and red elemental creature tokens, and you can discard it to create a treasure. So the discard's not that relevant, but maybe something that can make a bunch of mana or like blue-red spells wants a big finisher, but I just don't really see any world where you can really just tap out. But it does remind me of like a Pauper version of, oh my god, I'm blanking on the name. The Jun Dragon that makes two 4/4 flyings. I always forget the name of cards, but I know exactly what they do. So it's like a big Pauper version of make two 4/4s, which you don't really get in Pauper, but it's interesting. I don't know if it's going to be quite good enough, but it is a lot of value on one card. False Summoning, I think this is a strong lesson to have in your sideboard for the late game. Enthusiastic Study seems like one of the worst ways to learn, in my opinion. Essence Infusion, this is interesting, but it's worse than the one where it's put a +1/+1 counter on target creature and a lifelink counter. I think this is just worse, so I don't think that'll see any play. We already went over the lessons. Not going to go over every single one. Exhilarating Elocution, is it? Exhilarating Elocution. I don't think this is actually good enough. It's interesting and it caught my attention at first. It's 4 mana sorcery. Put two +1/+1 counters on target creature you control, and then other creatures you control get +1/+1. And it seems interesting. Like, oh, I can like pump my entire team and make one of them bigger, get in there, and then next turn I still have a power and toughness boost on one of my creatures. But it's like, this is just so much worse than Rally the Peasants. Giving all your creatures +2 power and then killing them right then is better than like, well, maybe next turn when I untap, I have like another big creature. It's like, no, if I'm playing like an Anthem effect that gives all my creatures a buff, I just want it to be +2 power and I want to kill my opponent. So not gonna do it. This is actually interesting because it's a reasonable 1 mana defender, and if you have some way to know the top of your library, then you can like gain some card selection by milling cards that you know are bad. And if you're some type of defenders deck, like being able to play more 1 mana defenders is interesting. I don't think this is strong enough, but just interesting to keep in mind. It's a colorless card. Turn 1 this, turn 2 Overgrown Battlement's a decent curve. So I like defenders. I played defender combo way back before it was cool to do so. My list wasn't as good as the list now, but yeah. Interesting. Field Trip, this is one I didn't really talk about, but I think it's a decent way to learn. Again, I don't know exactly where. It's a 3 mana rampant growth for basic forest, puts it onto the battlefield tapped, and then you get to learn. So 3 mana rampant growth, tutor a card, that's reasonable. 3 mana rampant growth for forest, discard a card, draw a card, also reasonable. You can discard an extra land. So yeah, Field Trip could see some play, but I'm not as hyped on that as the other ways to learn. So that's interesting. Expel, just not good enough on raid, I don't think. Having the creature have to be tapped is just, you're competing with cards like Lightning Bolt and Cast Down. No way. Fractal Summoning, Strong Lesson. This is actually interesting. This is probably the best Frostlinks we've seen. 3 mana 2/2 flying. When it enters the battlefield, tap target creature an opponent controls. That creature doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. Um, I almost thought like, well, I mean, what if I just played this in something like mono blue aggro? Like locking down a creature for a turn can be really strong, and you're getting a 2/2 body. It seems like, oh, it's like a limited card, but I mean, imagine your board is like Delver plus like a Spell Stutter Sprite, and then you play this. I think because it's a bird wizard and not a fairy, it's just not going to make the cut. If this was a fairy, I'd be jamming it. I'd be jamming, but yeah, I don't think it's going to quite get there. Fuming Effigy, this one's interesting. This is a quote combo with Relic of Progenitus. 4 mana 4/3, not bad on rate. Whenever one or more cards leaves your graveyard, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So you can just exile a card, tapping Relic every turn, and then pinging them for 1 each time. But even then, 4 mana 4/3 just gets lightning bolted, not good enough. Guiding Voice, 1 mana learn, strong. This is interesting. Heated Debate. 3 mana instant can't be countered at common. I think this is the first time at common we've ever seen can't be countered. And 4 damage to target creature or planeswalker. I could see this in the sideboard against blue decks when you really want to just make sure to kill like a ninja or something. They can't interact. But it's not going to be good in something like Burn. If it could go face, it would be incredible because then Burn would want it. Then you have this thing in the late game against blue decks. You're playing like they're at 7. You play a lightning bolt, and then they're like, oh man, I have to counter this lightning bolt because if they have Heated Debate, they can burn me out. But it doesn't go face, so I don't think it's going to see that much play. But I could see it as like a 1 or 2 of if you're like super scared of like the blue counterspell decks and you have to kill something. But yeah, I don't think so. Infused with Vitality is another interesting one. It's just, we've seen this effect a lot where you can save one of your creatures and bring it back when it dies this turn. But this is a strong one. Yeah, it costs 2 mana, which is like a lot more than something like Undying Evil. But it gives the creature Death Touch, which is interesting. So if you have like a 1/1 with like an Enter the Battlefield ability, you block and then you give it Death Touch, you gain 2 life, you trade with their thing, and then your thing comes back and you get an ETB trigger. So this is actually interesting. I think it could see some play, maybe in even some type of sacrifice decks, but I don't really like these effects that much in general. These lessons are all good. I'm not going to go over them though. Lash of Malice, yeah, it can be a pump spell or a kill spell. Seems like piqued my interest at first as well, but I just don't think it's going to quite get there because I mean, it just seems like worse than Disfigure or those effects, and they don't even see much play. So yeah, not gonna do it. This is just like Letter of Acceptance, just like the worst Bonders ornament I've ever seen. So obviously not gonna see play. This is interesting because counting the number of lands is like a powerful effect in a deck that's like trying to ramp, but 6 mana make like a 6/6 is just, I don't think quite gonna cut it. Even if you can make a 6 mana 8/8 or something, like just at that point just play Ulamog's Crusher. Not gonna quite cut it. Oh, Mage Duel was interesting. I kind of skimmed over this one when I was making the top list, but I don't even think it's gonna do it anyway. So this, where I could see it seeing some plays in the sideboard of Mono Green Infect, and I know that's not a tier 1 deck, but basically it's 3 mana, target creature gets +1/+2, and then it fights target creature you don't control. But if you played another instant or sorcery, this only costs 1 mana. So what you do is basically go like land, like something like Groundswell, and then you play this for 1 mana, you pump your thing, and you kill their blocker, and then you attack. So I could see this being better than the 2 mana. There's a 2 mana version that target creature you control gets +1/+2, and then it fights another creature, and that sees some play. But I think this could be better than that in Mono Green, in fact. Mage Hunter's Onslaught is interesting. I think it's too expensive on rate, but destroy target creature or planeswalker, and then whenever a creature blocks this turn, its controller loses 1 life. And this is actually pretty interesting um, in like some type of black aggro deck, because if you have three creatures out, you kill one of their blockers, then you send, and then they basically, like, if they're at a low life total already, they can't block because they're going to lose more life anyway. Um, it seems pretty narrow. Don't think it's going to quite get there, but interesting. Karok, just not big enough, not strong enough. Make your mark. Now we have two cards that have this effect, but yeah, that the other card doesn't already see any play. I don't think that's gonna quite do it. Maybe there's something where you're like sacrificing and like making a bunch of 3/2s, but no, I don't like it. Um, Needlethorn Drake, Icefang Coddle, not quite. Does not have the one little line of draw card on it, but it's actually interesting. I mean, 1 mana, 1/1 flying death touch is gonna trade for a card from the opponent, but the problem is they can kind of choose when they trade that card. But I do kind of like it. I have an idea for a brew with this. I don't want to spoil it, but I might be jamming a Needlethorn Drake at some point, even though I don't think it's that good. Let's go. I gotta kind of pick this up a little bit. I guess these are the last cards we're going through, so it won't take too long here. Not strong enough. This is interesting. 5 mana, 3/4 haste, but yeah, just not good enough on rate. Even if you get to play it in Scry 1 when you don't have attacks, that's just not good. 5 mana, 3/3 flying. The ward 3 is nice, but not gonna do it. I really do like pest summoning as a lesson, so I think that's a strong lesson to have access to. Too expensive for Pigment Storm. Pilgrim of the Ages, interesting. 3 mana, 2/1. When it enters the battlefield, search your library for a basic plains and put it into your hand. It doesn't actually fix your mana, but it is a 3 mana card that replaces itself, and then you can get value later. But it's just too clunky and expensive. Not gonna work. What is this one again? 5 mana, 2/2 flying. When it enters the battlefield, return target creature with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to your hand. That's actually a decent value, especially if you're able to like, flicker it at all. I could see that being pretty interesting, actually. I could see this seeing play in some type of like white value deck, but it's probably worse than the 5 mana 3/3 flying that just brings like an artifact, enchantment, or whatever back. So I think it's worse than that card. So probably not going to cut it. Already went over these. These seem good. This is just not good enough. Oh, Professor of Zoomancy is actually interesting, and it's a cute bear art, so kind of like it. 4 mana, 4/3, not bad. When it enters the battlefield, you create a 1/1 black and green pest token, so you create a pest. But so for 4 mana, you get 5 power and 4 toughness spread over 2 bodies, and that's a reasonable rate actually. I mean, 4 mana, 5/4, that's not bad for Pauper. You don't really get the 5/4, but you get that much power and toughness for 4 mana. So watch out for the big bear here. Professor's Warning, this is interesting. Giving a creature a +1/+1 counter, like in something like if you're a black type of like infect deck or something. I know I keep harping on that, but it's a it's a way to save your creature, or if they like bolt something and then you can get it at a range. But yeah, just not strong enough. Cool art with Professor Onyx. So another campus. This is just not good. This is not going to do anything. Reject. I just don't think it's quite strong enough. There's just way better counter spells in Pauper. Um, this is interesting. It does have like a lot going on here, but again, just definitely not strong enough for Pauper. 5 mana, 4/4. No, not going to cut it. Resculpt is interesting. 2 mana instant, exile target artifact or creature. Sounds great. But its controller makes a 4/4 blue and red elemental creature token. So I think the only time you want to play this is exiling your own stuff. I mean, this does do something because there's artifact lands in the format. So 2 mana instant, and then exile my own land, make a 4/4 at instant speed. So like on turn 2, maybe on Affinity, I pass the turn, then I exile my own thing, draw a card, or not draw a card, make a 4/4, and then untap and attack, or ambush their thing and block. So the more I think about it, this seems reasonable. Also, just having this in your deck, they go like, okay, kill your Frogmite or your Mirror Enforcer. You're like, well, exile it, get another 4/4. And then in a pinch, you could exile something if they're gonna like combo off and give them a 4/4. But yeah, it's hard to use because you have to use it on your own stuff. You do not want to give them a 4/4. I think this is just really expensive. I don't think you're gonna want to pay 6 mana, exile a creature, learn. But I mean, you do get to exile a creature, tutor a card, like in something like Mono Black Control. If you had one of these in the late game, exile a thing, learn, then scry 2, draw 1. I mean, that's slow, but that's a lot of value. Colony, 8 or more lands, not going to happen. You're never going to get to 8 lands in reasonable games. 2 mana, 2/2 reach, not strong enough. Um, oh, this card was interesting. I forgot about this card. 4 mana sorcery, create a 0/0 fractal and put X +1/+1 counters on it, where X is 1 plus the total number of instant and sorcery cards you own in exile and in your graveyard. So maybe this could be good in blue-red spells because you're just like cantripping a bunch, playing all spells. You can even find this with the 3 mana sorcery, reveal the top 6, and then take up to 2 instant or sorceries and put them into your hand. And then you just play a 4 mana like 10/10 or 4 mana 20/20. So yeah, that could do something. Maybe this should have been on honorable mention. Serpentine Curve, let's go. That's cool. Okay, I'm fading a little bit, but we're getting through this. I actually have to go pretty soon. I have something else going on. Let's see, Spectacle Mage. I thought this was interesting because you can curve this 3 mana 2/2 flying, and then on turn 4 land and play a 5 mana spell. But I don't know what you would actually play, and you don't really want to have a bunch of 5 mana spells in your deck, so I don't think so. Spiteful Squad, I don't think is going to be good. 4 mana 2/2 Death Touch. Yeah, it has a good ability, but not going to cut it. Not going to go over these vanilla creatures. This could do something. It's like a really, really bad Kitchen Finks. We've seen this card before, though. I don't think it does anything. I don't think any of these are good. Study Break is an interesting way to learn, but I don't know if it's good enough. Tapping 2 creatures and they just get to untap. So you can stop 2 attackers, learn, buy time, but don't know if that's exactly what you want. Sudden Breakthrough. No, not good. Let's see. Don't think this is good on rate. Tangle Trap is actually an interesting one. It's just like basically a shatter in green that also can have a mode of dealing 5 to a creature with flying. So that's reasonable. It's a decent sideboard card. I could see you wanting this, but most of the time it's going to be worse than just like having a naturalized or something in your sideboard, or a dedicated hate card for flyers. Like a 1 mana deal 3 divided as you choose among flyers is better than this. So if you want hate for flyer, there's better hate. Tome Shredder, it was like, oh, that could do something, but 3 mana and then 2/2 haste is not good enough. And then exile an instant or sorcery from your graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on it. It's just not quite. It's not quite good enough. Imagine playing it and then it has haste. You get to grow it right then. So you have a tapped 3 mana 3/3. Next turn you have to tap again, and then you have to have food for it in the graveyard. Not going to cut it. Way too expensive. This is actually interesting because it's a 1 mana 1/1 menace, and you can get value from it. So yeah, this is another card that could have been an honorable mention. Just because 1 mana 1/1 menace is kind of annoying, and then being able to get value from it later is actually pretty good, even if it's expensive. It's just good value on a 1 mana 1/1 menace. So that could see some play. 4 mana 3/3/1 flying. It's expensive. Ward 2 is strong, but again, they can just bolt it and then pay 3 mana and kill it. So it's not that good. And this is actually almost was another honorable mention because again, Magecraft, you can play a lot of spells, and a 5 mana 5/5 is not terrible on rate. So I could see this as a sideboard card against like aggro. You just like boom, 5 mana 5/5, and then you untap, and then you're like spell, spell, spell. If you're like a blue-green deck or a blue-black deck, and then you've gained 3 life, and you have a massive blocker against something like Stompy or an aggro deck or Burn. But even then, you're playing a 5 mana 5/5 that you're hoping to untap with. That's why I didn't end up making the cut. And that's all the commons in Strixhaven. So pretty sweet. There's a lot of cards, like I said, that could see play. There's a lot of bad cards too. Like a lot of the cards I didn't even read, didn't go through. But I hit all the cards I wanted to hit. And there was a lot of cool ones. Again, I am excited. The first deck I think I'm going to try to play is playing with this Absolute Unit. Seems just so fun to just like 2 mana 5/4, what you got, doesn't die to bolt. So I'm pretty excited to play Graf, and I'm pretty excited for Strixhaven. So I hope you liked this video. This was something a lot different than I typically do. I've never recorded a video of non-gameplay. I got a lot of requests to go over these Strixhaven cards, and hope you liked my opinion. Hope you liked my top 5. Tell me how trash my top 5 is and how I got it completely wrong. I'd love to hear it. And thank you so much for watching. My name is Max. My channel is youtube.com/snapbolt. Throw a like on this video, subscribe. Really helps me out. Thank you so much. Till next time. Peace.